Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Map Time Davis, virtual online today. I have the honor of introducing our speaker today. Vanessa comes to us from the GreenInfo network, and she's zooming in from Washington, D.C. today. She's here to talk to us about OpenStreetMap, or OSM, and she will fill us in about what this amazing tool is and how to use and edit it. And Vanessa, I'm going to let you speak a little more about yourself and hand it over to you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah. I'm the Associate Director of GreenInfo Network. I've been at GreenInfo Network for a couple years. Now GreenInfo Network is a nonprofit. We help other organizations by making maps for their projects, from USGS to Audubon to smaller organizations. We really have a wide breadth of support. We do cartography, GIS analysis, web development, interactive maps, web pages, database management, data automation, and a lot more stuff in between. Before GreenInfo Network, I was a senior map designer at Mapbox. Before that, I was a cartographer and graphic designer at an environmental nonprofit. Prior to that, I worked in humanitarian aid for USAID, and before that, I was in grad school. I'm gonna teach about OpenStreetMap, and I can start presenting if that works for everybody. And also adjust my screens. I have two screens. I like using one to see people. Okay, can everyone see? Cool. So before diving in, while obviously you guys know I'm going to be talking about OpenStreetMap, I'm doing it in a few different tiers. First, just a general intro, and then I also want to talk about how OpenStreetMap is useful and not just dive into making data, because I think that's really important. Obviously data is data, but talking about how it's useful and how you can use it, I think will really help you understand what small edits or large edits can mean for you and for anyone else using the data. So OpenStreetMap, I'm sure many on the call know, but just in case you don't, it's like the Wikipedia of maps. You can look at it online and just kind of see everything in the world, just like Google Maps. The difference is that the data is all non-proprietary. It is community created. It is continuously mapped by people. It's mapped by people you might know. It's mapped by people globally, and it's been a cumulative effort to get all the data on the map, and that's pretty cool. And what's really awesome about it, beyond the fact that we can use it, is that we can access that data, and because it is free and open collaboration, it means that if something needs to be mapped, we can just do it instead of just telling Google, like, we want this on the map and having to wait to see if they'll actually add it. And you can download the data yourself and use it yourself. So all of those things are great about OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap itself has a variety of base maps that they use. Their standard base map is intentionally designed to try to show as much of the data as possible. It is impossible to show all of the data, and it's also impossible to prioritize different types of data. And that's why they have other base maps. So a lot of people clearly really want OpenStreetMap to have cycling. So that's why it has two different cycling base maps. There's also a transport specific base map, which is likely used for like logistics and navigation. I forgot to look up what trace track means, but that's obviously something else that's important. And something that's been important in OpenStreetMap for a long time is its support for humanitarian use cases, and that's why there's a humanitarian specific base map as well. And this is, I don't know, I felt like I needed to really highlight it by creating a GIF and just showing the different base maps instead of just having static imagery. As you can see, like, the data changes and the colors change just to re-emphasize what pieces of data matter depending on the base map. And of course, like I said, the base maps exist, but what makes the base maps is the data. So what's also great about OpenStreetMap when you just go into OpenStreetMap is you can immediately start looking at the data when you're in there. I'm not going to fully go into that, but it's really nice because it's different than every other mapping service out there. You can use the sidebar on the right to see what the data is. So if you click map query, you can see what a building is. You can look and see what other data information it has. If someone added when it was created, it's going to show that date. If someone decides to add more than just it's a building, like this one here, it says it's a museum, it says its name. You can really go in there and see that. Same with if you're like a cyclist and really want to investigate like the cycling routes, you can see like what the max speed is in a particular area. Same for roads. So that's really nice because that's something that we can't get on other map services, that level of investigating data. And they also have a data view where if you just click on map data, you can just see all the data at once. Even if it's not visible in the base map, it'll show you what's under the surface, under the hood, I guess. So that's pretty nice as well. Again, this is all just when you go into the website and not like diving into adding in the data. So I would say that's all already useful. But how is it useful to you and to others? I already said you can pull it into base maps and that it's free and public use, but really the power of it is the fact that we can access it and use it for so many things. Because when we as map makers want to use base maps, we don't have as much power in making things look a certain way or pulling in specific data in the base map. If we want to use a Google base map, it's really useful because people are used to using it, but we can't change the data side as much of it, but you can with OpenStreetMap. It's cool though, because even though we don't have as much access to it in other spaces, all of these other organizations like Mapbox, like Cardo, including Esri, and I also think Google and Apple use it as well, although they're not going to highlight as much on their pages, they do pull from OpenStreetMap. So when you're actively adding data to OpenStreetMap, you are affecting base maps that exist in other spaces that use like the huge big names in the mapping world. This is an example from Cardo where they created a base map for people to use, and it's all using only OpenStreetMap data. They didn't like add on additional pieces of data. And like I mentioned, OpenStreetMap has historically been used a lot for good in humanitarian spaces, so much so that there's something called HOT OSM, which is Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and they utilize OpenStreetMap to add data into OpenStreetMap to support humanitarian cases. So once you learn how to create data yourself, you can participate in these mapping sort of mapathons or needs, and they have a list on their website under this tasking manager. So you can just add buildings, you can add roads, you can do a lot to help support humanitarian stuff from your computer, and that's really powerful. I used to work in humanitarian aid, and I cannot emphasize how much this helps. Even if you spend like only an hour mapping stuff in one of these tasks under the tasking manager, you're doing a lot to support it. And the satellite imagery for these is up-to-date satellite imagery that's donated by multiple satellite companies. So just, I really wanted to highlight how useful OpenStreetMap can be from that. And it also is useful in other projects, like this Open Historical Map project is something that GreenInfo Network is supporting Open Historical Map with, where they're mapping the history of data over time. So it's really cool. It's another sort of Wikipedia of maps, but it's like the history of data in the world, and that's really nice. And at GreenInfo Network, we use OpenStreetMap all the time in base maps to support other projects because it is open source and free. We really like to use it with nonprofits that really prioritize the information of community and like having it readily available. We use it in a lot of our park and environmental sort of conservation sort of maps, like this park info map. And we've pulled data from OpenStreetMap to do analyses. So again, like it's really useful beyond just the base map because you can use it in your map analyses as well. So this particular project for Youth Outdoors, we pulled California parks data from a California parks data database that we've helped to create and support. We pulled streets data from OpenStreetMap, and we pulled demographics data from the census, and we created this interactive analysis that with the streets from OSM allowed us to highlight the visitor sheds of who has access to parks, and a visitor shed is just like a way to frame like how many people have access to park area. And it's really important in trying to improve societal stuff, which is a lot of the sort of mapping we do. And this is a project I'm actively working on where I pulled in OpenStreetMap building data to help support an organization in Puerto Rico with a map that I'm going to create that highlights abandoned buildings and derelict buildings that they can use, kind of convert into community use buildings or change into parks. So again, like the data you're adding into OpenStreetMap isn't just useful for a base map, it can be actively used in mapping projects and actively helps a wide variety of projects. And relative to that, it's good to know how you can get the data and not just how you can add it. Again, I'm not going to dive into like how you can download this, but GeoFabric and Overpass Turbo are really popular ways that people gather OSM data. But OSM has an OpenStreetMap Wikipedia, and they have a lot more information. And I'll share the slide deck after I'm done talking, so you'll have access to everything in these slides too, including the links. So there's even more options beyond that, but those are the two most popular ones. And yeah, with that, we can dive into adding and editing data. But before you add data, obviously there are some data quality considerations that you need to think about because so many people really do actively use OpenStreetMap. When you're adding data, there's just stuff that you want to be thinking about, which is just like, just be intentional about adding quality data. Don't add stuff if you don't actually know what it is, or don't just go in and trace things kind of haphazardly, because it does matter. There are some ways that there are bugs and ways to report things so that people fix it. But if you don't actually like want to add data in, just like you can just not do it. And there's also OSM Wiki has good and best practices for considering when you're contributing, but for the most part, it's pretty simple. It really is just like trace what you see, tag what you know, and if you don't know what it is, then just keep it general. Like if you don't know what a building is, you can just tag it as building, period, and you don't have to like add any extra level of detail. So if anyone is following along in terms of wanting to actively map while I talk, you can feel free to log in now, and I can give a couple minutes for folks to create an account. Maybe a minute, it shouldn't take too long. So I'll just take a break, and I also can leave space for questions while people log in and create an account.
Thank you, Vanessa. It never ceases to amaze me how much data and information and how beautiful the OSM maps are. Whenever you open it up, you think, oh, community contributed. And then you look at it, you're like, wow, it's incredible. So I'm excited about learning more how to add and edit things. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I can just move on to the next slide. People can still be creating their accounts, because the next slide is just saying where I decided we should map today, and I can share this link. I was going to try for DC because it's where I live, or Davis because it's where you live, but both of those have been mapped really well in OpenStreetMap. So I didn't want to start somewhere that had a lot of data, because then you can't actively follow along. So I went and found some place that I knew probably had less data, which is Concon, Chile. And I just chose this because I know it fairly well, because I'm half Chilean and have been there quite a bit. So it's just like my choice. You're welcome to map wherever you want to map, but it is useful for me because I can always go back and review things since I know the spot. But definitely if you want to map anywhere else, you're welcome to. It's just like where I used examples in my slide deck. Again, this is showing it has some stuff mapped there, but then there's plenty of buildings and many other things that haven't been mapped, so it's a pretty great place to start contributing with tracing buildings. And I did screenshot and GIF a lot of stuff because I've done many live demos and workshops virtually, and sometimes stuff like my internet just get slower when doing so. So just flagging, I'll do that, but I can always hop on if people have any specific questions and log in and do stuff live as needed after I present a bunch. So like the basis of all maps, not counting raster and imagery, of course, the main thing for getting started and creating data is to know that you're either going to be creating points, lines, or areas. And that's really nice because OpenStreetMap gives you some examples of what this would be. So point can be restaurants, monuments, postal boxes. It can be bus stops. It can be coffee shops. And then lines are like highways, streets, canals, rivers, and those sorts of things. And then areas can be a lot of different things, parks, buildings, lakes, just anything that is an outline of something that is going to encompass a larger space. And I like starting with creating a polygon because I suppose it's the most complex thing. It's still easy at the end of the day. So to create a polygon, you just like go to all the points in the polygon that you want to work with, and then you double click to end the polygon. Ending it just means that your mouse no longer is creating the line to go to the next node. So you want to double click on your final node to just end the polygon. And with that, you've created your first building, and it's really simple. There's a little more stuff you want to do in order to move on from that. So if you like need to edit a node, if it feels like your node landed in the wrong spot, you can just grab a corner and pull it over to wherever you'd like it to be. You can do this with any of the nodes in your building. If it has 50 nodes, if it's a really complex building, you could do it to all 50. There's no limit. And you can do it if you had to log out and log in the future, you could still edit it in the future as well. There's also an undo button in your upper right screen. So if you completely hate a few things that you did, you can go back, and you can just use Control-Z as well. They do have the standard going back keyboard control built in. You also can right click and do a lot more. So you can right click and make something into a perfect circle. If it's a circle that you're tracing on a road or in a garden, you can make things into a perfect square, which really it's not a perfect square, I guess. What it's doing is it's making all the angles perfectly 90 degrees. So if it's if it's a complex polygon like many buildings are, but you want the angles of the corners to be 90 degrees, that's really what it's going to do. So it's not technically making things perfectly square. And there also are other options. So here it says you can move, like if it's slightly off place, you can use this 4 arrow thing to move it around. And then there's just other options that you can explore. Like if you need to shift things around a little bit, if you made something vertical accidentally, then you can make it move horizontally by using this one or this one. And the copy feature after you right click, I think is really nice because in some areas, when you're mapping stuff, you might want to copy and paste the same shape. So I zoomed into this location in Konkon, which is some kind of industrial something. And all the buildings are exactly the same shape. So I started with this one. I right clicked, I hit copy, and then I moved over to where I wanted it to be placed. And then I right clicked and hit add duplicate. And then I right clicked and used the move feature. And I was able to use the exact same shape and just copy and paste it everywhere. So I didn't have to retrace those nodes. And that's really nice. Other places you might see that might be in the suburbs when it happens that developers like use a lot of the same shapes for buildings. So that might make things move a little faster. If there's like a lot of road circles in a city, you can copy and paste the same road circles in a city. So that can be really useful. Or if like there's something with similar shapes and you want to copy paste the original shape you made and then edit the nodes a little bit in your new building to match it to your new building, you can do it there too. So once you're happy with your tracing, if it feels like it fits your building or whatever else you're tracing, the next thing you want to do is select your feature type. You also can do this at the start. You don't have to go in and edit the nodes first. You can assign the feature type whenever you want. I just decided to explain like everything with editing first. So there's endless options for what a feature type is. This is a building, so I selected building. You can be way more specific, as some of these examples show. I could assign this nail salon, I could say it's a hospital. You also can use the search function to look up really specific things like branded places like Starbucks. And here is an example of other levels of detail you can add. So if we're a building, for example, you know how tall it is, you can add in the height, you can add the address in, you can add in the name if the building has a name, like if it's a museum, if it's like this high school here, Colegio Altasor, you can add a lot more information beyond just building if you know it. If you don't know it, again, it's fine to just label it generally and say it's a building. There's no requirement to know more. Any level of detail is great for adding information to OSM. Like I said before, you can use a search function to assign really specific level of detail or something more general. And you can try searching a wide variety of stuff. And here's me for a point feature, just showing different examples. And with stuff that can have symbology, you may notice that the symbols change as you search for things. This is not a Starbucks bench, but I think it just didn't like update live quickly enough. But as you see, after when I chose McDonald's, it moved to burger. This represents, I don't know what anymore, but it'll like cycle out. And feel free to like try things out and see what things are. But just remember to delete features that you're exploring with, like just make sure to delete it after if you're not actually like doing anything with it. Like this one, I mean, really, that last point and this point that I used as examples, it didn't actually exist in that capacity there. So I just deleted it after I created them. So with lines, just like with points, just like with polygons, you can add them on the map anywhere, and they have different types of information that you can add to them. For footpaths and for roads and many other things, it'll just give you stuff like structure, like what is it? Is it a bridge? Is it a tunnel? And for roads, it'll also ask you what kind of road is it? Is it a highway? Does it have a name? Is it one way? What kind of surface does it have? Is it paved? Is it unpaved? So it's really awesome the level of detail that you can get in this information. And you can see in this map that this data it does have like a directionality. So for folks who use OpenStreetMap for navigation and pulling it into navigation apps, the roads that have directionality, therefore can on a map produced pulling in that data say like, hey, this road goes in this direction. If that makes sense. So just to show the level of detail and options that exist for if and when you know what to add in terms of the attributes. Yeah, and this is just, again, showing the wide variety of detail that exists in OpenStreetMap when you have a lot of information to add. So after you're done making edits, you obviously want to save the edits when you feel like they're in a good place. You can, if you accidentally exit out of your browser and log back in, it does save the edits you've done in sort of draft form. It doesn't delete stuff just because you exit it out of the browser. So that's really nice. But in order for it to be put into OpenStreetMap, you have to upload it. So you go to the upper right corner of your screen where that undo redo button is, and to the right of that is a save button. So that's where you can save everything. And what you want to do when you're adding stuff is make sure to add a change set comment. So for mine, I added some buildings in Concon. But whatever you're doing, just make sure to describe it because it's really helpful for anybody that may come back and just want to know if they want to know what got added over time in an area. It's nice to see. It's also nice to know in the event like there was an issue and they want to see what the issue was. And they don't want to delete everything in your data, people at least can like tell like, okay, maybe it's just this small thing that's an issue and we won't touch everything else in the change. And you can upload data without it being reviewed, but if you feel like it'd be nice your first few uploads to have someone actually review it, you can check, I would like someone to review my edits. So it is nice to have that ability for folks to just know that their data isn't going to immediately be ingested, just to flag that. And you also can add, oops, you can add tags, and here in the bottom, you can look at the changes as well. So after you hit upload, if you hit upload, you also can see the changes in OSM, and you can click on this link here. And it also shows you where you made changes. So for me, I added a building here, and I believe somewhere over here was where I like made those copy paste buildings that was some kind of industrial something. So it's showing me the breadth of where my changes were. I will say that this OSM says it will appear within a few minutes and then goes on to say it may take longer. For me, it always takes longer. I don't think I've ever seen it happen in a couple minutes. I'm sure somewhere in the world it does happen, but not for me. So just like have patience in seeing the changes. I, for example, where I live, the morning I was working on this, I went to look at where I lived and I noticed that a few different things around where I lived, including that this Pete's coffee no longer exists and it's now a Starbucks coffee. So I changed that. I saved it 2 hours prior to like creating this slide. And I was annoyed because I was like, this didn't happen in a couple minutes. Like it wasn't updated immediately, but I did use the data function, the data query function in OpenStreetMap, like the main site, to see if I could see the changes in the data, even if the base map wasn't updated. And the data itself is updated. When I clicked on it, it does say it's a Starbucks. So it's possible the base maps may be what takes a little bit longer to change. I'm less clear on that, but I did want to highlight that your data, the data itself may actually be updated in a faster time. And it might be that the base map rendering takes a little longer. So it might be waiting a full day. Like if you really want data in a map that you're using, you might want to just plan ahead to have that show visually in the OSM base map. And that kind of leads to editing existing data. What I did was edit existing data. It's really the same process as creating your own data, only the difference is you're going in and just adding something to data that already exists. So you can, some things you can do, of course, is update data, and that's like update details. You can adjust the polygons. There's probably many other ways you can think of to update it. And for something important to know for OpenStreetMap is OpenStreetMap only wants current data. So if you see something that doesn't exist anymore, it is okay to delete it. I did like triple check this, even though I know this is true, because I still was like, I don't want to delete data because something about that feels inherently bad. But OpenStreetMap does say on their official Wikipedia to delete non-existent features, because that's the whole point. They want it to be live in the same way that Google like shows you what's open and what exists and will delete stuff that doesn't exist, or at least say something is closed. Like we don't want stuff on OpenStreetMap to be shown on the map that doesn't actually exist. So in this particular example, I went to an Ulta Beauty that I knew doesn't exist anymore. I right-clicked on it, which this GIF is doing really fast, and then I hit delete, and then it just disappeared off the map. And then I saved that, and then hopefully that'll be updated for anyone who wants to find an Ulta where I live. They won't find it at that location because it's not there. Another thing that you can do, like I said, is update attributes. So this particular Kung Fu Tea Bubble Tea Cafe spot where I live, I knew from having one time gone there at 8 p.m. that it was not closed after 7 p.m. like the attribute said. So I was like, oh, this should be updated for whoever else loves bubble tea and might be using OpenStreetMap. So I just double checked. I fact checked the time just to be sure in case my memory was terrible. And I was right. It did in fact close at 9 p.m. So I went in and changed 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. so that bubble tea lovers who use OSM can go grab bubble tea at 8:30 if they so choose. But just a reminder to only update on what you know. You can fact check like I did with Googling, but if you're not sure, it might be better to just make sure you're positive and then go make an edit later. And this is just another example of everything I said, editing examples. And yeah, that's really like the main bit about editing and creating data in OpenStreetMap. I do want to provide some resources. OpenStreetMap, like I said, has its own Wikipedia page. It's got loads of information. They also have their own beginner's guide. I'm sure their beginner's guide has some more information than what I gave too, if you want to explore that. I recommend checking it out because they have information about what attributes are. If you really want to know what specific things are, you can go in and read about it. They have a general help page as well. They have some stuff that they probably get asked a whole lot so that you can just go click and read. And then they have even more resources. And they also have other pages, like they have an entire info page about contributing data. So if you really want to know more beyond adding stuff, there's a lot of resources there. But you also can do a lot with what I've just told you now, but I just want to say there's just more to learn if you want to learn more. And finally, if you love adding data to OpenStreetMap, this is not the only way to add data to OpenStreetMap. If you end up getting really into it and wanting to add like a lot of data at once, there are more advanced ways to do it, but it is definitely recommended to get to the advanced stage first and not start with bulk uploads, because bulk uploads at the end of the day, like in any GIS space, require a little bit more time to QA, QC. But this is a popular one. It's called Java OSM, and you download it and do a lot of stuff. Not going to go into that today at all, but wanting to flag that it is not just like interacting with the website to add data. There's way more ways to add data. So with that, I hope that you have some happy mapping in OSM.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Do you want to take any questions, or do you have some time to show us some actual live mapping?
I can take questions and can also do live mapping.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, I have a question. This is about editing and deleting features. Can you talk a little more? If you know the Ulta is not there anymore, but it's like the physical building's there, but it changed into something else, would you then, instead of deleting the feature, would you edit the tag?
Yeah, you definitely can edit the tag. That particular one that I edited was like a huge mall. So then I just deleted the point feature. But if it was one building, I absolutely recommend editing the tag itself and changing it to whatever is the latest thing that it is. Can OSM be imported into ArcGIS or QGIS? Yes, it can. Both ArcGIS and QGIS have, I think QGIS has a much better pipeline for OSM data actively being pulled in. ArcGIS, perhaps because they want you to use their data, you have to do a few extra steps to do it, but you still can do so. ArcGIS and QGIS also provide OSM base maps, and not just the data.
Just to add my 2 cents on that, I often will download OSM data from GeoFabrique and then just bring that into QGIS so that I can style it the way I want it and I can edit it. That's my workflow, but I'm sure there are other ways. And then also the base maps as well are nice just to drop in the background to see stuff.
And so can you say more about the historical map that was shown in light of OSM's focus on Live data? Absolutely. That is a great question, especially since I went over it so quickly. So Open Historical Map, this is Open Historical Map. It pulls current live data from OSM, but all the historical data is actively stored within Open Historical Map infrastructure. So the Open Historical Map data is not getting piped back into OSM. It is stored within the Open Historical Map infrastructure. But if I go to today and probably however long Open Historical Map has existed in the last few years, the present day data in 2024 and say 2014, I'm not sure how long either have existed, that probably is largely OpenStreetMap data. And while OpenStreetMap will no longer have whatever may have closed in 2014, Open Historical Map will have that. They are not the same thing, but they do have a relationship. And I can try and speak more to that if that requires more detail. How does GeoFabric work? Does a user export a portion of OSM somehow? Yeah, I can show that. I really like GeoFabric because it is fast. I'm live. Let's see, data, downloads. This it. Okay, so GeoFabric, basically their folks are actively processing and downloading data, and they will collect data and then provide subregions for download. And I believe with GeoFabric, you technically can pay them to do more specific stuff, but for the most part, this is good enough for average use cases. So I really like using GeoFabric because of that. Overpass Turbo has a partial learning curve where you have to learn some of the commands in order to download things. This opened to Puerto Rico because this is where I last downloaded stuff. I don't remember. I typically have to look up how to use this, so I can't do a live demo on it unless you want to watch me Googling to jog my memory. But it also, like, once you read how to do it and like know the specifics of what you want to pull in, basically, like, what's nice about Overpass Turbo is you can flag that you only want to download some types of things instead of all OSM data for a geography. So then if I, for example, only want to, like this says, download industrial buildings in a specific space, then it'll only download that for me. Or if I only want to download OSM roads, or if I only want to download roads that are highways but not residential and not something, like you can make it a more complex query, which allows you to just have a lot smaller of a data set. So that's also why these two are really good. Like, this is great if you just want to get all the data and then do the querying in ArcPro or QGIS. And then this is great if you want to take the time to pre-process the data before you download it. So am I presenting my screen, or did I forget? Was I like doing stuff on my screen?
No, we can see your screen. I think it's also worth mentioning with GeoFabric, if you like click on the like North America link, it'll open up like more subregions of North America. Yes. So you don't have to download all of North America, which would be a lot of data. So if you just want California or you just want Sacramento, you can kind of narrow down your focus and not have to download everything.
Yes. Very important to mention. I do believe, I mean, I remember Puerto Rico, I downloaded, I feel like I mean, it must have been United States, but I thought I found one that was just Puerto Rico, but it might have been me doing some more clicking around. If I need historical data, how would I download over older versions of OpenStreetMap? That is an excellent question. I do not have the answer for that right now. So Open Historical Map does that, and they're a separate entity. I can ask my colleagues who definitely probably have done some of that and get back to you. There also, in theory, there may be people who have also written about that online. The geospatial world is really awesome because people publicly share how they do things, which is pretty great. When there's a humanitarian crisis, are the tasks prioritized by the task manager in some smart way that is driven by people on the ground? Or is it just a default sorting of tasks? Yes. Typically they are prioritized based off of immediate need or dire need. So typically the order and the task manager is like that, or at least based off of when I worked there. I don't think they would have changed that, because they do want people who are just kind of checking in, but not necessarily paying attention to the disasters to just click on what has been identified as the thing that needs the most stuff. But obviously all the things need stuff. Sometimes I don't know, if there's like a really, really, really bad earthquake, that's probably going to be prioritized over like a mild drought. The drought is still bad, but the earthquake needs like immediate tracing of where buildings are or aren't and other things to help with logistical planning. Details within a single disaster area. Do all roads before buildings? That's a good question. I think within it, usually within the tasks, they may highlight the pieces that need to be mapped first.
That has been my experience with the task manager. They'll be the things that are urgent are marked urgent, and then once you pick that, it'll say just focus on buildings, or just if they have a focus, it'll usually, and usually, not usually, often there will be a some sort of intro video or read more with examples that are specific to this kind of region, because building styles can be different and roads can be different. So they'll give you a lot of information about what the task is about and what they want you to do. I mean, some of them are less detailed, and it's all volunteer, so you gotta remember that. And just do your best to ask questions. I think there's usually comments and notes when people upload things.
And here's an example of, so this is flagged as urgent. So they are like indicating here. And I think like depending on the area getting mapped, I mean, this could have changed since the last time I was more actively in it, but I think they also sometimes like even flag like in the squares, like what areas are more urgent via the visual depiction here. And they will show like what's been mapped, what hasn't been mapped, as well. So here's a description, etc.
So Vanessa, if you have a few minutes for some live mapping, I have a pretty specific question. So like in my hometown, not my hometown, my kid's hometown, in the city of Davis, our elementary school got a totally new building, and the playground got all rearranged. And I'd love to update that in Davis. And so this is kind of there's some new features, there's some things that got moved, and then there's some let's see, so if you I have to tell you where we're going. So we're at, if you zoom out just a little bit, and then okay, see the circular pattern in the streets, and that's Pole Line Road. If you keep heading north, and right about there, yeah, Davis Cemetery, and then follow the curvy to Birch Lane Elementary School. You can see the I can't point. I can point on my screen. Keep going. Move the hand a little north of the purple line, and then a little to the left. And then there's a, right there, that's the elementary school. And if you look at the satellite, you'll see that instead of a big green square there, thank you everybody for the, okay, so where there was a big green square, you can see there's a brand new huge building, and they moved the basketball courts and a bunch of stuff. So I'd love to, like, I was thinking I'd go in and edit this. Would it be better to say delete those basketball courts because they're not there, and then draw new ones, and then reshape the things that have been reshaped? Is that kind of the idea? You kind of go in there and fix what you have and delete what isn't there?
I think either works. I think it depends like what your workflow ideal is. Like maybe like this, if I actually can actively select it. Well, if it was actively selecting, I could like push it and make it smaller, or maybe I have to right click this square. Disconnect. Oh, okay. This is currently connected to another feature. So I'd probably have to disconnect it before making some edits.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
And sometimes that happens to make sure stuff is flush. It looks like this is also connected to this road. And that just helps the data be exactly overlapping. I think, say the basketball court, you could move everything around if you wanted, or you could just completely delete it. I don't think like previous editors would care, as long as you're just like mapping what's currently on the map, because at the end of the day, like as long as the data is accurate, that's really what matters. I think if there's like any thoughts on people I don't think people check in on their data that much if they did map stuff, but if they did, people probably would only be annoyed if people like deleted something only to do the exact same square or something.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on your workflow. Like if it feels like it's easy to adjust this to match, then that's great. If it seems like it'll be more annoying and it's much better to like restart and like go around and make custom nodes, that might be faster.
Okay, great. So it's and at the end of the day, the point is, the goal is accuracy in the current, not necessarily preservation of the whole like mapping history, right? Like the evolution of each feature. You're like, the goal is to make it look correct. Cool, thank you.
Lupe, do people get notified if their previously mapped data is edited by someone else? Not to my knowledge. I think that it's the only time I know, again, I don't know everything, but the only time I know people have been contacted about their data is if there's something like really wrong with it, that it needed to be deleted, and that they were like investigating their account. Because that does happen. Like if like people are doing nefarious things, they will absolutely contact you to let you know that they're investigating. Can you say more about connections in the context of hierarchical structures? The whole area is a school, but it contains 10 buildings, 5 fields. Yeah, that's a good question. So I think this is the school. Yep, so this polygon is school grounds, and it is not inherently connected to this polygon here inside of it's a baseball field. So there are separate polygons, and this polygon is not data-wise inherently connected to the field next to it, I believe. I think it's just like kind of snapping to the grid, so that none of these edits I'm doing are going to be saved. So if I move this node, the way that it's connected is that it's moving that. But if you downloaded the data, it's not going to say like this is a baseball field, for example, or this is a garden. Having the lines and the nodes connected is to allow two things that maybe are inherently connected to move, or like this could be like a property boundary. So like moving the property boundary in theory could affect a road if the road is also going to move alongside the property boundary, if that makes sense. Was that helpful?
Can I follow on that, Vanessa, and ask, can you do something like select the buildings inside the school grounds in one, like, if you've got the data, if you're downloading data from OSM, can you say, I want this school ground and all the buildings inside it?
I think that's possible in Overpass Turbo, because then you'd be just feeding it like specific attribute information. So in this case, it would be like where's the window I was using? This one. Is this one. So maybe like this is okay, Birch Lane Elementary School. So perhaps making up attributes, if it was like school equals Birch Lane Elementary School as the first sort of query, and then a second query, you might be like saying you only want buildings within that area, then it would give you that. So it's just like any other query, but you would have to like know the query path to get the final result. So that'd be good for Overpass Turbo, or like I'm sure other mechanisms exist as well where you're just pulling the attributes. Does GeoFabric remove any OSM tags? Like if I want surface type or something specific, do they limit the number of tags included? I don't know if I have the answer to that, but I would suspect they don't delete tags because you need tags in order to identify the data. And I think it would probably make users downloading data annoyed. But I can't say that for certain. Like it could be that they would have like a limit to level of data to save space, but I don't think that's true. I'm not sure, like Michelle have.
Honestly, I think like I've been working with the roads data set a lot for some maps that I've been doing. I don't think it includes every possible tag for the roads, but anything that would be common. So like it tells you things like, I think road direction, it definitely has like road type, like is it residential, is it, highway, things like that. So I think it's selective, but it's pretty expansive. Like I think sometimes in OSM there are tags that are kind of unique to a very specific situation. I don't think you'll get all of those because the attribute table would be enormous then, but it has like the standard things you would expect for like roads, and I would assume buildings would be similar. So while people are thinking of other questions, I want to plug, if anyone figures out, gets really good with Overpass Turbo, we should totally do a workshop on that, because every time I've tried to do it, it is a challenge. Like there's some really specific skills you need to make that work. So, if folks figure out how to do that well or find some really good tutorials online, let me know, because I think it would be a really cool workshop to do here. But that is not in my current skill set. So if you have that skill, we could add that. All right, Charlie's got a question.
There is something of the sort, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know it exists. Also, if anyone else on the call does know, then I can show it. This is me doing what I would normally do. Aha. This is probably how I normally look stuff up. Normally there's like there's a map that you can also look at. This might not, this isn't it yet, but this is a good example of how you can look up attributes. There is something like that in the OpenStreetMap wiki that I just am now not remembering off the top of my head. Oh, maybe it's tag info. Aha, it is tag info. We got there. I was slightly embarrassed. I was like, I should know this, but I sadly don't always remember everything that I've done. So what's nice about this, so like highway, or any other data that has different sorts of things within it. So it's showing how much of different types of stuff exists. So perhaps not shocking, there's a lot more residential data compared to footways, for example. And you also can look at values, and it's showing the same sort of information with a description. And I think, yeah, you can change the order of that if you want. For it may matter for other values, like that may not matter as much for folks looking at roads. So you can use a lot of this information in taginfo dot openstreetmap.org to look at your data even more. And here it shows how much more it's been mapped over time. So I assume around here is when OpenStreetMap started. So it has continuously built up to 2024. I think highways, of course, is going to be something that consistently gets mapped. But if it's like a new piece of data or data attribute that gets added into OpenStreetMap, or if it's something that isn't mapped a lot, but for whatever reason got talked a lot about in the community, it probably would be interesting to look at this to see how specific instances change over time. Highway perhaps is a terrible example of showing the map use case. Here you can see how it's really truly global, that highways exist everywhere. I've used this before for some data pieces that are less common. I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but it's nice just if you're like trying to look at OpenStreetMap for seeing where you should look on the map to find the thing, it's nice to reference this, because then maybe I'll be like, okay, there's like 2 red dots here and over here, and I'll go look over there. Because sometimes if you're using OpenStreetMap or trying to contribute to OpenStreetMap, you want to contribute a specific thing, or you want to pull a specific thing, so then you know what area to go to pull it. Or if you're a cartographer specifically, you know where to go to that area to see how you're visualizing it. Because in code and in other spaces, I could assign a value like color, width, whatever to something, but I can't know if it's going to actually look good until I see it on the map. So that's how I've interacted with the map, but I'm sure there are endless other ways too. And then on this page, you can see how the wiki pages associated with it, projects, which seem to be specific OSM related projects that are using highways, which probably also are endless, and characters is this probably is something that feels like should have more than just Latin for highways. I know less about this tag. I haven't actually looked at this one much. I would have assumed it had more than just Latin for highways since it's so global. But anyway, that was me talking out loud. Hopefully it was helpful in my Googling and finding what I use. Just so folks know, that is maybe a 10th of being a GIS person is knowing how to Google stuff.
Well, this has been really, really cool, Vanessa, and very informative. And I've used OpenStreetMap and I definitely learned a lot today. Are there any more questions from the floor, or are we ready to end the recording and let the, like, as Michelle likes to say, let the dumb questions happen where people feel a little more ready to talk? There's no dumb questions, but sometimes
I have
a
a
question.
I
Yeah.
have a discovery that I probably knew once upon a time and stop. On tag info, if you're on a particular tag and you really want this tag, there's a wonderfully convenient overpass turbo link here, and you can link it out. And then it has everything you want to download that stuff, so I can run this. So now it's only selected stuff that's tagged as highway. And then to download things, if you use Overpass Turbo, you just hit download. I don't know what that stuff is, or export and GeoJSON. So for this, I think in the past I've downloaded GeoJSON or KML, and then I would open it in QGIS to convert it into a shapefile, or you can do that also in Arc Pro, but I feel like my pipeline often for OSM is QGIS first. But that seems important. If anyone wants to download particular data that they find on tag info.
I love that because, like I said, I struggle with overpass turbos. It seems so useful, and then I look at it and I don't get what I want because I haven't learned it well yet.
I mean, same. I use Overpass Turbo and then I stop using it and then I forget how to use it. I don't know how to use it in a complex way. I'll put this on my screen that Reed just shared. OSM history. Hey. Seems relevant. Cool. Well, this might answer. I don't know who I know who asked the history question, but this might be where to grab that. Especially if you can download it. Glad it was helpful.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa, for this presentation. This has given me a lot more insight into OSM data, which I use all the time, but it's nice to, to get an intro to the sort of inner workings of it. And yeah, just thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.